And each year at the Economic Summit, SCAG releases a comprehensive report on the state of the region economy, created in partnership with a team of economic experts that are here today. This year, due to scheduling conflicts with multiple holidays during 2024-25 and the 2024 Southern California Economic Update will be presented during today's regional council meeting, which I kind of like because now we get to engage with them one-on-one versus, wish that we had some time as board members. The presentation will be followed by in-depth discussion on the state of the economy among regional council members. Before we begin the presentation, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on item number 8? Nope, we're good. Okay, before we begin, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our SCAG in-house economic analysis team with the demographics and growth vision business unit. So we're getting those same little books that we always get every year. And this is our team that's put all that together. So thank you guys for putting all the great work together. Now it's my pleasure to introduce, here we go, Kate Gordon, CEO of the California Forward, who was invited to moderate today's presentation and all our discussion. And you're going to tell us what stocks to buy and our interest rates are going down and how well we're doing going forward, right, Kate?
That is my plan.
There we go.
It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, President Hagman, for inviting me to be a part of this important economic update. And I'm particularly excited to be here to introduce today's presenters and be part of an important discussion as we evaluate the state of our region's economy. And today's analysis presents a detailed economic outlook for the region and highlights that the rebound and growth in sectors such as good movement, healthcare, and tourism can and will hopefully drive the economy in the coming year. So before we begin, I wanted to note that SCAG, in collaboration with the team of expert economists that are here today, have put together a 2024 Southern California Economic Update, which I highly recommend looking at. It includes a review of the region and each county in 2024 and an outlook for 2025. The economists here have also provided short essays in the report on sustainable and equitable economic growth, which they will summarize next in our panel. And it's a great resource. It's not a doorstop. It's not super big. It's worth reading, and it is tailored for all of you. So please do take a look at that. So I would love to introduce this economic roundtable, each of whom will be presenting highlights from their analysis, whether that's a county analysis or a broader analysis on sustainability or equity in the region. And these 7 individuals are your thought leaders for the region. And I'm sure you've come across them many times and their insights in Southern California for decades, but really happy they all are here today. So I'm going to start all the way down. We're going to go down to Mark Schneep and then come back and then go back to Mark later for Ventura. But I'm going to go down to Mark, introduce Mark, Director of the California Economic Forecast, to provide an overview of the regional economy. So down to you, Mark.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, that works. Okay, just to start here, 2024, we're not quite over with it, but we nearly are. It's turned out to be a lot better economic year than we all had thought. Economists a year ago were still predicting, or some of them anyway, recession, or if not recession, much slower growth than we had seen in 2023. But that didn't happen. In fact, we're going to end up with above trend growth for the US this year and probably even for the state. So for the SCAG region, we're actually seeing more than twice the number of jobs being created in 2024 than we saw last year. So that was kind of a highlight, is the labor markets are contributing more job opportunities this year. The issue, however, is that a lot of those jobs are concentrated in just a few industries. And the chart on the right-hand side shows you that healthcare, leisure and hospitality, and construction, those were the 3 big winners. We track, 13 private sector labor markets. The other 10 combined actually lost jobs in 2023 and 2024. But the big winners were, again, healthcare, leisure and hospitality, supported by tourism, and in construction, supported by all the new development in the region, which I'll talk about very shortly. And in that box are some high valued sectors, such as film, TV, and sound recording jobs, which we call the Hollywood jobs. And after the strike, which ended in November 2023, we still haven't seen jobs restored in this sector. Hopefully, we will start to see at least some restoration of jobs moving forward, but to date, that has proved a drag on the labor markets in 2024. Furthermore, the other sector, other high value sector, would be technology. And this picture is of scientific and technical consulting services, but it also includes technology also includes software development, data processing, computer design, computer security, and we haven't seen that be restored after a lot of the high PR layoffs that occurred in the tech sector in late 22 going into 2023. So that's sort of moved laterally, hasn't really been a big contributor. This, we believe, will change, however, going into 2025. One of the bright spots is our international trade through our ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. And now, even after the strike, we've seen trade volumes soar at these ports again. So this is now getting us back onto track after we lost a lot of this trade volume through the Panama Canal due to the strike. Tourism has also been quite vibrant. This picture shows you passengers at LAX and at the other 3 airports combined, but visitor counts are up. Attendance at the amusement parks are up. Hotel occupancy at our principal tourist counties is up. So tourism has been quite a vibrant contributor to the economy of the SCAG region this year. But I think that the largest engine of growth is new development, all the different projects that we have going on. And in the non-residential area, you can see this map has a bunch of circles all over it, showing you the development projects that are spread out throughout the SCAG region. And then I've listed a few here on the right-hand side. The Brightline West high-speed rail train is fully underway. World Logistics Center in Serrano, Commerce Center. Those are huge projects in the Inland Empire. Same thing with Kaiser in Redlands, and lithium extraction in Imperial Valley. But we've got some very, very large projects that are going on in non-residential area. And again, our book highlights all of the most principal ones, but that's a major driver in the region throughout. Housing this year, new housing, we turned down just a little bit after reaching a 12-year high last year. So we're off just a little bit, but that's due to the high interest rates that we're seeing. If those come down like we anticipate going into 25 and 26, you'll see housing run back up. However, new development projects in housing have just been stellar. In fact, take a look at the first 5 projects on that list on the right-hand side. Silverwood, Aquabella, Disney Cotino, those are all in the Inland Empire. And then Hitch Ranches in Ventura County, the Great Park in Irvine. Those 5 projects account for over 40,000 homes. And all of those projects are either approved or underway at this time. So we've got a lot of new housing ahead of us and a lot of new development that's going to continue to drive this region over the next several years. Let me just end with the outlook overall for the region. No recession, and not even slower growth. We look for 2025 to even be a little bit better growth than 2024. Much of the negative impacts from the pandemic have been fading away. They will continue to fade, and that will then help to accelerate overall growth in the region. Logistics is now stabilized and probably will come back more, particularly with all the new development. We've got large-scale transportation projects, healthcare projects, energy projects, And then, of course, tourism. All of that momentum in those sectors is going to carry over into 2025. Housing construction, new housing, and then new existing home sales, because interest rates should cooperate better in 2025. Those will also drive the economy of the SCAG region next year. And then we've had a lot of surge of immigration that these people will actually be able to fill jobs. But as we note here on the text slide, this presents a challenge for housing too. So we're going to need more housing for this population gain. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. And you can hang on to this slide. Michael, we are going to go from that high-level overview, which is incredibly helpful to anchor all of us, to individual county updates, and starting with Michael Bracken, who is the managing partner and chief economist of the Development Management Group, to provide an overview for Imperial County.
Well, good afternoon. First of all, if you're a fan of eating, then Imperial County is important to you. Last year, over $2.7 billion of agriculture product was produced. Cattle, lettuce, carrots, onions, honey, and hay all led growth. GDP topped $8.6 billion for the region, which is about $47,000 per capita, one of the higher percentage growths we saw in California in 2023. Unemployment remains stubbornly high, which is quite frankly typical for an ag and border rural region. On the energy side, in 2023, over 9,400 gigawatts of renewable energy was produced. Imperial County is the third highest producer of renewable energy in the state of California. Not bad for a region of 180,000 people, certainly punching above their weight. Finally, work continues on 13 new geothermal and lithium extraction facilities, totaling almost $17 billion of new economic investment. Known projects will generate over 7,000 one-year equivalent construction jobs and over 1,000 operational jobs. The 1,000 might not seem like a big number, but let me scale it to LA. Scaling to the size of LA County, this is like saying LA County was expecting a $900 billion investment, or the equivalent of 150 SoFi stadiums. That's a significant amount of growth, and 50,000 new jobs. That gives you a sense of what the impact of the geothermal lithium extraction industry will be on the Imperial County region. The region obviously remains hopeful for this economic renaissance to continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael, and you can pass that down to Shannon. Next, we have Shannon Sedgwick, Senior Director of the Institute for Applied Economics for the LA County Economic Development Corporation, to provide an overview of LA County, which we just scaled up to. So now we can hear about it at scale.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So today I'll be providing just a brief overview of Los Angeles County's economic trends and outlook. So we've been steadily recovering from pandemic disruptions in the county, and we've seen industries like healthcare, technology, and tourism show really promising growth. However, we do have some challenges. So economic inequality, high business costs, and housing affordability really remain those critical challenges for us. We expect our gross county product to grow by 3.3% by the end of this year, 2024. But we do expect that to taper off down to 1.3% by 2026. And so these figures indicate, we do have resilience and stability. So it is positive, but it is at a slowing pace as the region continues to face some of those macroeconomic pressures. Our labor market's been resilient. Again, that faces some volatility. Non-farm is expected to dip by the end of this year, so 2024. And we're expecting some modest gains next year in 2025. And then our key growth sectors include healthcare, professional services, and advanced manufacturing. Meanwhile, unemployment is expected to rise to 6.2% by the end of 2026. We're seeing that inch a little bit higher. And this is kind of underscoring the need that we have for targeted workforce development and policies that really support job creation and upskilling, particularly in industries that are in transition. So looking at our key industries, driving growth, healthcare, social assistance remains our largest employment sector. And of course, that's driven by aging populations, increasing healthcare needs. In the entertainment industry, while rebounding from strikes and digital disruptions, it continues to play a pivotal role in our region's identity and economic output. And tourism has shown a strong recovery. We've seen international travel specifically return and bolster hospitality and retail sectors. Many are going to talk about trade and logistics. So it's a key industry here because, of course, we have the San Pedro Bay ports. And we did face some challenges in this industry with labor disputes and changing global trade dynamics. So we're expecting public and private investments in renewable energy, technology, and infrastructure to present opportunities for some sustainable growth and job creation moving forward. We've had some challenges in our office sector. We're seeing some rebound happening there. Just recently, 3.8 million square feet of office space was leased during the third quarter of 2024. And in addition, there's over 1.7 million square feet of office space under construction. That's representing about a 0.6% of the total office inventory in our county.
Shannon, can you put the microphone just a little closer to you?
I'm
Would you
sorry.
mind? Thanks so much. Just put it down a little so it's closer to your mouth. Thanks.
The cord. Okay. So housing affordability, I mentioned, is an issue. Right now, only 14% of households in Los Angeles County can afford a median priced home in 2023. And of the county's 3.5 million housing units, 55% were rentals. And looking at rent burden of those rental households, rent burden is impacting nearly half of all renters in the county. So we really do need to address housing supply and affordability moving forward through adaptive reuse projects and new construction. So median household income reached just over 89,000 in 2023. So if you're looking across the past decade, that's a growth of 18.1% in real terms once you adjust that for inflation. And so this did lead to a slight decline in our individual poverty rate, but we still remain the second highest individual poverty rate across all these counties in the SCAG region. So our future really hinges on innovation and collaboration, investments in renewable energy, infrastructure, and education. We're looking at those as being things that can lead us towards sustainable growth and job creation moving forward.
Thanks so much, Shannon. Appreciate that. Next, we have Wallace Walrod, who's the Chief Economic Advisor for the Orange County Business Council, to provide an overview of Orange County, and just a reminder to everybody to keep your mics close to you as you're speaking.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Kate. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Great. Great to be here today to talk about Orange County, my favorite subject. So you guys probably already know that. Orange County, small but mighty. We are less than 700 square miles of actual land area, but if we were a country, we would be just behind Chile and Czech Republic in terms of our gross product, and actually just ahead of Finland and Portugal. So think about that, a small 700 square mile county in Southern California ahead of Finland and Portugal, EU members. So really amazing amount of economic activity. As you see in the first bullet point here, we traditionally have had the lowest unemployment rate. So we're right about 4% right now. We have the highest median household income. We're over 113,000. Ventura is about 110,000, and those are the only two that are above 100,000. Lowest poverty rate, 9.1. And then probably most importantly for Orange County's economic future, we have a very highly educated workforce. So our workforce talent is our greatest asset. We have almost 45% of our working adults have a bachelor's degree or above. So really tremendous workforce talent that drives sort of the economic growth. Now, we do have a little bit of an Achilles heel that's not unique to Orange County, but really is our biggest issue, and that is our workforce housing situation. We have just not been building enough housing units. We actually do a report that we've been doing for 25 years, so we look back 25 years. So right now, our in 1999, our average median sales price was 275,000. It's 1.45 million right now is the average. And then California Association of Realtors publishes what they say is an entry-level housing price. That's 1.16 million in Orange County is the entry level. And as I said, we're about 113,000 in terms of median household income. In order to qualify for that, it's almost $234,000. So we need to build more and we need to keep generating good paying jobs. When we look back 25 years, the statewide average between 99 and 2024 was a growth of 300%. Orange County actually grew the most of any county in California, 413%, more than San Francisco, Santa Clara, and all of the SCAG counties. So housing will continue to be a big issue. And then finally, echoing what Mark said, we have an amazing amount of projects that I highlighted in the executive summary. I only had room to highlight 7 of those. Those are on the map you see there. That totals about $13 billion in new investment over the next couple of years. And they range all the way from OC Vibe, which is a mixed use entertainment project that envisions being the downtown of Orange County. We have Disneyland Forward, a major expansion of the Disney Resort. We have we have housing projects like Related Bristol, Magnolia Tank Farm, several projects in Santa Ana. And then the last thing I'll talk about is we are becoming sort of a healthcare center. So there's amazing amount of investment being made in healthcare, major healthcare facilities in Orange County. And the 2 leading ones are the City of Hope is building a huge new campus. And then also UCI is building a new hospital. And that's already actually open and the first phase is already done. So those projects are providing good paying jobs during construction, but then also during operations, they're going to be providing jobs as well. So hopefully Orange County will continue to sort of drive the county and the region forward in terms of prosperity. And I echo Mark that I think 2025 is going to be a great year for a county and the region. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for that, Wallace. And turning to Manfred Kyle, who's the chief economist of the Inland Empire Economic Partnership and Claremont McKenna College, to provide an overview of Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And I wanted to note that his co-author of this section of the report, Robert Kleinhens, is also here. And so just wanted to acknowledge him as well. Wallace. Sorry, Manfred.
Good. Well, thank you. Just a few things that if you're not aware of it, to summarize sort of how to look at the Inland Empire, which is San Bernardino County and Riverside County together. It is by now the 12th largest metropolitan statistical area in the United States. There are 380 of those, and we are the 12th largest. We just passed San Francisco. The next one ahead of us at 200,000 more is Boston and Cambridge. So just to give you an idea of the size of the population, right? Second thing to note is that 20% of its labor force commutes. If you're in San Bernardino County, you primarily commute into Los Angeles County. If you're in Riverside County, you primarily commute into Los Angeles County, to Orange County, and to some extent into San Diego County. And the final thing to note is that only 23% of the population in the Inland Empire have a bachelor's degree or higher. In the United States, that number is 38%. If you put those 3 facts together, you do understand why the greater Los Angeles area has a commuting problem. People who have higher human capital will commute into the coastal area where they will get better paying jobs. The Economist recently referred to us as the warehouse capital of the world. The Inland Empire has done relatively well. Riverside County has done slightly better than San Bernardino County, and that's due to an adjustment in the logistics sector. So following the coronavirus, there was overinvestment in the logistics sector. People just thought that it would continue to grow at the pace as we had when we came out of it. And 2023 and 2022 were 2 years of adjustments. So that has stopped now, and the industry is growing again. If you look at the slide, 2 lines of mathematics would show you that the change in the unemployment rate, not the unemployment rate, is the difference of the growth rate of the labor force, that's the third line, minus the growth rate in employment, okay? So therefore, if you look at it, the Inland Empire has grown at the same rate as the United States and California, but different from California, we've added more jobs. And that's why the unemployment rate only went up by 0.3%. And again, Riverside County doing slightly better. The county data is unfortunately only available until 2023. So the EDD publishes the new data at the end of the year, so we won't have that data until by county for 2024. And you know, these are simply the growth rates over the 2 years. And for the Inland Empire together, what stands out is, as with other counties, the increase in particular in healthcare. What is worth noting, and I want to stress this, is that the two counties are quite different. Not that different, but they are different in terms of industry sectors. So logistics now is the largest employer in terms of the share in employment in San Bernardino County. Every fifth person works in logistics. That is not the case for Riverside County, where education and health has a higher share and government has a higher share. Something to say about the outlook for 2025. The 2025 will be fine because whatever potential threats there are to logistics, they will not happen until 2026, the earliest. One possibility is, of course, the imposition of tariffs by the Trump administration. And that would be a 60% tariff on China. Now, let me stress this. And tariffs do not reduce the trade balance, but they do reduce trade. And the question is, if we reduce trade with China, what other country will replace that? If that other country is from Asia, then it will have no effect on employment in the logistics sectors, nor on the ports. The question is, if instead it will be replaced by imports from elsewhere that go to the East Coast, then that will have an effect. And the second thing to mention is AB 98, which was passed, and that in 2026 will add building and trucking requirements to new warehouses. And let me say this: we have not to this day had a proper cost-benefit analysis of the logistics sector. It is always easy to criticize the logistics sector in terms of environmental grounds. But let me tell you an example of why it is necessary to have a cost-benefit analysis. In the United States, every year, 40,000 people die on the road fatalities. That's a simple number. You can look it up. I can reduce that to 0 with one policy. You know what that policy is? Will impose a 5-mile-per-hour speed limit on all roads in the United States. But you're not willing to do that. So does that mean you're willing to let 40,000 people die? Yes, you are. And it's a similar thing here with the logistics industry. What we have to realize is, yes, there are environmental problems with the logistics industry, but there are also benefits from it. And in particular, in terms of employment, right? And until we do a proper cost-benefit analysis, this has not been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manfred. I'm going back now to Mark Schneep to provide an overview now of Ventura County. And just a reminder of folks to keep these remarks somewhat short so we can have time for both the discussion and for the council to have time for questions. Mark.
Yeah, movement of good. There we go. Okay. Okay, so Ventura County has struggled in recent years, in the last 10 years or so, just to keep up with the economic growth in the other counties of the SCAG region. But surprisingly, it's maintained pace in 2024. So job growth is going to be about a little more 1%, about the same as the rest of the SCAG county. So Ventura County is finally caught up. Its unemployment rate is second lowest to Orange County. One of the big issues, one of the big sectors of the county that is doing very, very well, real bright spot is the port of Hueneme, which is not a container port, but is a bulk goods port. And the biggest item coming in there is automobiles, particularly Hyundais and Kias from South Korea, and BMWs and Mercedes-Benzes from Germany. And then other than vehicles, we get a lot of bananas from Guatemala and avocados from Mexico. So that's constantly coming in. We're seeing trade volumes soar in Ventura County right now. They're at all-time record highs. They'll probably keep going too. Agriculture is big in Ventura County. It's over $2 billion a year. Ventura County used to be the lemon capital of the country. That was about 100 years ago. Strawberries have taken over, and Ventura County is responsible for the largest strawberry crop, second largest in California. Salinas is first. Okay, so agriculture continues to rise. One of the reasons Ventura County struggle is because the population has been in decline for about the past 7 years. We're likely to continue to see that occur because that momentum is not really changing. We are, however, ironically, getting a lot more new housing development, so perhaps that will stop the outflow with new housing accelerating recently. Real quick on the outlook for Ventura County. Because we don't have diverse organic business growth, the extent of job creation is still going to be limited in 2025. We'll still see job creation, but it won't set any new records. We still have very high housing costs, as everybody has said here today, and the limited job opportunities will probably not necessarily stop the outmigration. So we're likely to see population continue to contract a little bit. But we will be building a little bit more housing because a lot of the new development projects that have been in legacy for the last 10 or 20 years are now starting to get pushed into operation. So we'll see more housing being done. And in trade, international trade is going to continue to power Ventura County, as well as a lot of the new development going on there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. And lots of common themes across these county updates, which we'll dig into a little bit in our discussion. But first, want to go up a level again to talk about both sort of sustainability and equity issues, which are obviously inextricably intertwined, as you'll hear in these two presentations. But first, starting with David Roland Holst, who's the managing director of the Berkeley Economic Advising and Research, to provide an overview of a topical brief from the report Sustainability in the SCAG Economy, which you'll see is actually also very much about inequality. So, David.
Thank you, Kate. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share perspectives. I'm from outside the region, so I have the privilege of thinking about more general topics of interest rather than county level specifically. And so I posed 5 questions, which I think have prompted a certain amount of anxiety in the local population, certainly for me too. It does keep me awake. And I'm going to try to answer those questions in 2 minutes, so it's going to go relatively quickly. But you can, of course, take a look at the report starting on page 56 to get the details. The first question is, the U.S. economy may be resilient right now, but have we kept up? Has California and the Southland kept up? The answer to this is made relatively clear in this figure, which is yes, California has continued to deliver for households very consistently. Median household incomes have been going strongly, and they're actually accelerating out of the COVID-19. The margin in favor of California of the region vis-a-vis California, and California vis-a-vis the nation has expanded. The second question: the economy may be dynamic, but who benefits from growth? Here we have more of a substantial challenge, I would say. California's income inequality is higher than the national average, and Black and Latino families are overrepresented at lower income levels. I think you're all familiar with that. How does an economist, particularly an academic like myself, propose a remedy for that? It's very simple. California long ago recognized the power of education to change people's destiny. Founding the University of California, Cal State, and community college systems, collectively the most successful experiments in the history of public education. So we're well aware of the kinds of remedies that can make a difference here, but we obviously have to make those institutions more inclusive and effective in terms of delivering growth-oriented and livelihood improving skills. The right policies can rectify historical inequity, of course. And in the last decade, in California, another approach, that is minimum wages, living wages, et cetera, have been implemented by 19 municipalities, 7 counties, and the state itself. There are inefficiencies associated with minimum wages, no question. As an academic economist, I have to admit that. But the actual benefits in terms of livelihoods for the lowest compensation categories are very substantial and need to be taken seriously. Question 3, I'm sorry, but I've got a very limited time. There's been much discussion about companies leaving California. So what? Is the state no longer competitive? The answer is in the next slide. Absolutely not. This is total investment, inbound investment to California against real GDP growth. And investment is growing in this state much faster than GDP. We've become an ever more sought after destination for investors. So if we take ourselves away from the headline cases of individual companies leaving the state, it's clear that California is still a mecca for opportunity, and it's seen as that by outside investors, both domestic and foreign. Our productivity and our technology and our innovation, those things are all irresistible attractions. It might be easy to dispel the notion that California is losing its appeal for doing business, but the issue of selective firm immigration raises some other more subtle problems. So obviously I can't digress too much on this point, but maybe we should be asking ourselves if we need companies that don't want to finance public goods and services or comply with improved environmental and labor standards. That's a question that we're not really addressing so much by being fearful of individual companies deciding to leave. But many people believe that commitments to improve the quality of life should be given higher priority than traditional growth itself. In any case, we're in no trouble as far as being a destination for investment. Number 4, population growth has slowed. Will this reverse our economic progress? There's more evidence in the actual publication than I have in the slides, but it's true. California's population is flattening. No question about that. What's wrong with that? An economist will tell you nothing's wrong with that. If you want to keep growing, all you've got to do is invest in skills, invest in productivity, improve the livelihoods of the workers who are already living here by increasing their marketable skills. Doing that will create more prosperity with the same level of population. We don't need humans as fuel to just keep increasing the state's population and driving economic growth. You can drive economic growth by improving the quality of employment and labor productivity. Last question, will California be affordable for me and my children? Housing affordability comes up in almost every conversation about the state economy. You know that. It's already happened several times on this one panel. And only 11%, Shannon already mentioned, numbers like this were mentioned twice already, so I won't digress too much, but the region's current median income is between 90,000 and 100,000. It would take 10 years for the average resident to pay for a home if they devoted 100% of their income to purchasing the house. The national figure for that hurdle is 5 years. So yes, this is the hardest nut to crack in California, housing affordability. It really is. And it's going to just remain at the center of our concerns about the state's quality of life indefinitely. I don't think sustainability is the issue here. The issue is basically the quality of our lives. Meanwhile, though, there's an ironic lesson from this dilemma, and that is that Californians have for years been willing to wait longer, save more, and make greater sacrifices in order to settle here. Maybe this means it's still the land of promise. Let's be optimistic. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much, David, for ending on that slight hopeful uptick. Our final presenter in this section, then we'll go to a bit of a discussion, is Beth Tamayos, who's the research director for the UC Riverside School of Public Policy, providing an overview on another one of the topical briefs in the report, Equity in the SCAG Economy. And again, you'll see that there is a lot of intertwining with climate in this piece. Go ahead, Beth.
Right. Thanks, Kate, and thanks, SCAG, for having me here today. So I'm going to continue with the theme of housing as a final wrap up to this morning's panel. And basically what we were thinking about in terms of the equity is how to frame it in something that's particularly salient to the SCAG region. And one of those is talking about housing. So this past summer, I was in a meeting where, in response to some wildfires in the region, there was some concern from some municipal government agencies about how we're dealing with post-disaster recovery and resilience. Because in a lot of cases, and we've heard this in the news recently, right, that there's a lot of wildfires that are happening in places that have not historically had wildfires in the past. And so thinking about what that means in terms of how we deal with it, how we recover from it, and how far we plan for it in the future. And additionally, considering that scientists have predicted extreme weather events like wildfires to become even more severe due to climate change, this was a good opportunity to use wildfires as a case study in equity and resilience. So the first question I had was, where are we building housing? Housing is increasingly built on the urban fringes, otherwise known as the wildland-urban interface. And this becomes an issue in terms of the equity question, because housing is often built on the urban fringes because it's just simply cheaper to build there. And in terms of equity, in terms of being able to have people access housing, this is also an equity issue because it is easier for someone to find quality housing for a lower price in these areas. However, fires are caused most often not by humans, and this creates additional risk for residents in these urban fringe areas. The second thing I wanted to think about was, why can't we get insurance to prepare for the unexpected? As I'm sure many of you are aware, it is becoming increasingly difficult to insure the places where we live. And in a recent meeting I was at, there was a wildfire that occurred in an area that hasn't traditionally had wildfires. And the residents there pleaded with the council members to not update the fire maps. Why? Because they were worried their insurance premiums were going to go up, or they were worried that they wouldn't be able to get insurance at all for their houses. So this becomes a bigger question about equity as well, because how do we balance the need for new developments against increasing difficulty insuring against emergencies? And the final thing is thinking about whom are we building for? So the questions we were thinking about here are, where and what types of housing are we building, right? So historically, disadvantaged communities are often bear a disproportionate burden from disasters. For the most part, when disasters hit, they're the ones who end up paying the highest prices. So this is an opportunity for planners and policymakers to be creative and innovative when we think about how to prioritize renters and low-income homeowners, when we think about where we're developing housing and what type of housing we're going to be thinking about proposing for them. And in sum, I wanted to close with kind of a question. This is sort of a thing for all of you here as SCAG members. How do we equitably balance resident safety, but still allow for enough housing such that all Californians can gain access to quality places to live that are also affordable? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth, and thanks to all the presenters for that great in-depth analysis and your contribution to the work in the counties that make up the SCAG region. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to ask some questions of the panel. And then President Hagman will open up for questions from the regional council members. So get your questions ready. So starting off, the county updates had a lot in common with each other, and we'll talk about a couple of things. One thing that you all talked about to some extent is the growth in sectors like healthcare and retail and services, which are not always the sectors known for creating the kind of high quality jobs or tradable goods that can help anchor regional economies. But we also heard a lot of expectation from many of you about the potential for manufacturing and supply chain growth jobs as a growth sector in the region. I'm interested in, and it's a little the elephant in the room, I guess, but does the potential disruption in federal funds for the infrastructure bill, for the Inflation Reduction Act, affect that outlook from you all on manufacturing and supply chain? And I'd love to hear, Manfred already touched on this a little bit on the tariff question. I'd love to hear from Michael. You talked a lot about lithium, which is one of those kind of beginning of the supply chain issues, but also Mark, Wallace, Shannon on that issue.
Yeah, I think I'd start with this. Personally, I try and separate rhetoric from policy. And I think the thing I keep going back to, Kate, is a month ago, President-elect Trump used the words drill, baby, drill. Well, geothermal can be part of that. lithium can be part of that. It's the use of natural resources in this country to propel this country's economy. And so from that sense, if I can limit the question to say, how could the issues between Washington and Sacramento affect Imperial County? I'm going to say probably not much relative to geothermal and lithium, because I think there's actually a convergence of interest between Washington and Sacramento. And it might be one of the few things they can agree on.
Thanks for that. Interesting. And may depend on the thing that you're extracting, but thanks for that perspective. Shannon, you want to weigh in on this at all? Sort of either on the balancing of the regional economy with, kind of services versus sort of more tradable goods, or just the political question?
Sure. So you asked about the question about supply chain. And so when we're looking at the potential for manufacturing growth, we're seeing it in more of those high-tech sectors. So we've been seeing a lot of growth that's been happening in aerospace recently, and in some technology. So high-tech intense product manufacturing as well. When we're looking at the balance of services, you're right. There's been continued criticism about the wages that are in these roles, but they do represent opportunities for employment for people with low levels of education. So there's a balancing act there. And we're seeing growth in those sectors because at least in our county, they were so severely hit during the pandemic that, when you're looking at accommodation, for instance, it's still kind of building back up to what it was. And same with retail, there's people are getting out, they're going to destinations, they're shopping a little bit more. Like Michael mentioned, there are some instances in our county that may not be threatened by potential tariffs. Yes, we have the ports and trade from Asia could be impacted, specifically China. But we have other things like oil production, where it's a very complex issue. And if that's allowed to continue, then our reliance on that crude being shipped in on big ships that are very high with pollution, like it may not, it might balance out in some of that because what we don't use that's produced currently in our county, we will be shipping in on those tankers. And so some of that we're waiting to see. But we have a lot of investment that's already happening in our county that's not dependent upon what's happening at the federal level.
Thanks so much. And absolutely go ahead, jump in, Wilson.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, just want to chime in. Actually, we find healthcare to be, for the most part, pretty good paying. And one thing about healthcare is even the entry-level jobs, that industry is very committed to moving people up through career pathways because it is the biggest growth industry. In Orange County, we're getting older demographically, and people don't stop getting sick during recession. So if I was going to tell anybody industry that to go into, healthcare is the one. Second, manufacturing is still a big deal in Orange County. It's 155,000 jobs right now. I think California needs to think about some of its policies because there is a big trend towards onshoring back into the states. And the Midwest and the South and other states are really playing a big part in that. And for whatever reason, California is not playing as big a part. And I have a very specific example that there's a defense kind of company called Anduril. If you haven't heard about it, if they ever do an IPO, that would be one I would invest in. The founder is the guy who founded Oculus that then was purchased. And they're probably going to have their headquarters remain in Costa Mesa, but they are not building it's a 10 million square foot manufacturing facility. They're not building that in California, very clearly. And finally, the biggest thing for Orange County is actually med tech and medical device. And I don't, because of the trends, locally, state, and nationally, I don't see that really stopping. We have a lot of very innovative companies that are doing amazing things. Not all of them public companies, a lot of private companies that have grown to like 5,000 to 6,000 employees just within the last 20 years. So that's an industry that is also a little bit insulated from some of the other trends.
Thanks for that perspective, and I'm glad you pushed back on me on the healthcare thing. I was hoping someone would. Mark Manfred, any very quick thoughts on this one? This question.
Let me first of all say what Mark said originally, which is important, that the two sectors that really drive the economy currently, which is it's health, but it's also government, will have problems this year because of budget constraints that will not be there next year. But those two sectors will not contribute along the lines of what they did. The second thing is, I urge people to have a look at a data set called NETS, National something time series, and it's expensive. It's $30,000, but it has all companies starting in 1990 in the United States, where they have headquarters and where they have moved to. And so that will allow you, just for California, that is 9.7 million observations since 1990. But that will tell you what sort of firms are coming into California and which ones are leaving. And to back up what you said, it's mature companies that are leaving, and those are the big examples that we have: Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, and so forth and so forth. The investment actually comes from smaller startup companies. If you look at venture capital in California, we still have more venture capital per year than the next 9 states together. We have more innovation than one other country in the world, and that's Japan. So in terms of innovation, it's there, and it's the small companies that we're focusing on.
Thanks so much. And Mark, quick word on this, and then I do have a couple other questions I want to get to. Go ahead.
Sure. And a lot of that innovation and venture capital is going into what? AI processes. Okay. So that's big. And AI will drive the technology sector, which is going to drive tech jobs. So we're likely to see a much more broad-based participation in the labor markets next year with more tech jobs. And with all these distribution centers being built and opening up, we're going to see more logistics jobs as well. Tourism has certainly driven all the leisure and hospitality jobs that we talked about. So they're going to continue to come. But again, more broad-based participation is likely.
Thanks so much for that. I actually had a follow-up question later on AI. It's interesting to think about both the growth impacts and the potential impacts on things like Hollywood, which we saw in those slides earlier. So I'm not going to ask that one. And I did just want to note, actually, Shannon, do you just want to say super quickly what you just wrote me in a note about nearshoring, and then I do want to move on.
Sure. At the LADC, we have the World Trade Center, Los Angeles, and so they engage foreign consulates pretty regularly. One of the things that we're seeing, Wallace mentioned a reshoring, but one of the things we're also seeing is nearshoring, specifically in Mexico, because they're close to our markets. It's cheaper out there. They don't have as much regulation, and they can just drive across the border with a lot of their goods. So it's a way of bringing those supply chains closer to us without actually being here.
Thanks for that point. Really important. Going down to David and Beth specifically, you both touched on this, but to draw a little finer point. So climate impacts, wildfires, extreme heat, flooding, coastal erosion, there is not a part of California exempt from this, are increasingly affecting California's communities and businesses. How are you thinking about climate risk and its impact on the regional economy, whether that's, investment impact, infrastructure impact? How are you thinking about that in sort of the near and longer term?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, this is a very salient issue, despite the fact that we may have a regime change in climate perspectives for a while. This is an inevitable process. I think everybody is aware of it now. And California became acutely aware of it during the fire seasons of 2017 and 2018. Those catastrophic events have aroused very strong defensive reactions in the state. And CAL FIRE, as the sort of heroic institution, is mitigating those risks pretty substantially, but they can't eliminate them. We can't change the consequences of global warming that quickly. In terms of what we look at in the economy, a vulnerability to weather events is a significant issue, certainly in coastal areas. California is relatively fortunate because we don't have a lot of low-lying population, although the exceptions are LA Basin and the Bay Area where I come from. The California coastline is generally relatively well protected against sea level, but flooding is still a very important issue. I think the place we should be looking today for economic consequences of climate risk is the insurance sector. Because as I've said before, insurance is the canary in the climate coal mine, right? They're the ones who are supposed to warn us of the threat. And they are warning us very emphatically in this state by essentially, I shouldn't use the term redlining, that implies some kind of strategic move, but disqualifying or outpricing large demographic areas, particularly in rural and montane areas in California. And this is creating an impact on people's own wealth. I mean, there's a wealth effect to having to shift the burden of replacing your home to the homeowner from an insurance because they can't get access to insurance. And when nobody's really come to terms with that, I think individuals do it, they lose sleep over it. But I haven't seen any authoritative assessment of this wealth effect. What is really happening in terms of our home and our real estate assets, because we're losing the ability to offset this risk. I can give you a hint though, and that is from a session that I organized at Cal, an annual climate check-in. I invited somebody from the insurance industry to come and speak, and this person said, I know you're all very concerned about climate risk, and I want to tell you our industry is doing everything it can to inform you. So if you live in the Gulf Coast area, you may find that your insurance premium rises to meet your mortgage payment over the term of your mortgage. That's because we anticipate having to replace your home during that time. So these are hidden liabilities that we really aren't quite acknowledging yet, but the signals are coming in ever more strongly. And the insurance industry really is looking for some kind of backstop, I think, from the federal government. I'm not sure if that will come, but if it doesn't, the wealth effects will be substantial.
Thanks so much, David. It's a sobering point. Insurance also applies to underlying things like investment in infrastructure, right?
Everything.
And very salient for municipal budgets in particular, but also the state budget. So I think a really important point. Beth, you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think from an equity standpoint, one of the things that comes to mind are the impact of heat. So extreme heat's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And particularly from an equity standpoint, when we think about a lot of our low-income workers, those are the ones who are most exposed to heat. So they're ones that are not working in climate-controlled environments. They're usually not office workers, or they're working in indoors, but in areas where they don't have a lot of access to climate-controlled facilities. And so, so that's definitely there's economic impacts to that, because if that is too hot to work, then we lose economic productivity. In terms of wildfires, that has also come up in looking at some of the equity impacts in terms of just individuals being unable to work because a wildfire has either closed their area or their business has been burnt or somehow otherwise affected by fire. So I think there's definitely several different impacts that we can see economically from an equity perspective.
Thanks for bringing up the labor productivity point, because I think that's overlooked really quickly. Yeah, go ahead.
Just some breaking news. If you haven't heard, there was a 7.0 earthquake in Northern California. So one of our more traditional disasters 2 hours ago.
And a tsunami warning. My kids' schools sent me texts about it. All off of I think Eureka, or off of just yeah. Yes, these risks are not confined to climate, but climate is increasingly among them. Related actually to what both David and Beth just said, you all talked quite a lot about affordability issues, obviously, in your counties, especially around housing. Some of the impacts that David and Beth talked about in terms of shoring up our state and our region to climate have also increased insurance costs, but also electricity costs. And some of the things Shannon talked about, gas prices are also quite volatile, as we know in the state. This is a kind of fundamental budget and overall affordability question for this region. Maybe to Beth Wallace-Michael, do you expect to see these prices keep continuing to rise? What do you think? What kinds of decisions do you think the region needs to be making around this overall affordability, this sort of triple threat coming on top of the housing issues, affordability crisis? Start. Whoever wants to start.
I mean, I think anytime we talk about affordability, I mean, particularly from an equity perspective, it's just that the lowest income earners are always hit from all sides instead of being hit just from, one perspective. So it ends up being either it's housing or it's housing and transportation or it's utility costs. And I think that particularly when we think holistically about costs, we don't always think about all the other costs that low income earners are still bearing to, are still having to shoulder on top of things. And so I know utilities aren't something that came up, but it's something that, I know has come up in conversations where low income households are having to make choices between, do you commute in, do you drive in, do you pay for gas, do you pay for electricity, do you pay for heating? How do you basically manage all of those things at the same time, which can be a lot. And so, obviously there's thanks to our municipal services that have provided, emergency help to individuals. But I think it's just, remembering that there are a lot of costs that we don't necessarily talk about that do add up for low income households.
Thanks. And then quick thoughts from others.
Yeah,
Wallace, Michael.
actually, very quickly, I actually do some work for a global reinsurance company, looking at some data. And yes, they're getting much better at pricing risk having to do with climate, but the bigger part is the actual cost of repairs has skyrocketed. That's actually more than the climate part of the risk that's what's causing the insurance price increases.
Yeah, I concur with Wallace. That is actually the issue that is going on, is that cost to repair, which is quite frankly a function of cost of goods, the materials, and then of course the all the increases we've seen in what labor costs are to get people out. Any of you as homeowners or business owners have seen what it takes to get people actually show up and work, to remodel a bathroom or a kitchen or something. It's becoming quite a chore.
Thanks for that. And I will be, thanks again to all of you, the presenters. I'd love to go back to President Hagman, who will open the floor to the council members on their questions for the panel. And we'll try to direct those to the appropriate people. President Hagman.
Thank you, Kate. We are limited in time here, but so make your question short and point to the actual subjects. So thank you very much, all the speakers. Start off with one. You guys touch around the edges, but both the California, what's your crystal ball say? Does that do to the outcome starting next year?
I maybe start with Mark on that one for the high level view.
The two issues were immigration. What was the other one?
Green industrial policy, basically.
Oh, immigration. That's probably going to change the immigration issue. I don't know that that's going to have a real big effect on the economy in 2025. I mean, a lot of immigrants are here now that have come over through the surges that we've seen. Our labor markets have been trying to absorb them, but they have not been able to absorb them fast enough. That's one of the major reasons why the unemployment rate has risen more in California right now. So I think we still have enough immigrant labor force to absorb into the labor markets over the next year, maybe even two. So again, immigration policy, however it goes, I don't think is necessarily going to stifle the SCAG economy at all.
And luckily, we already had some answers on the green industrial
Great, thank
policy
you.
questions. I'm going to go back to you, President Hagman.
Karen?
They turned off my mic. Just real quick, and it's not been brought up. I just left Riverside County. We had our economic summit. I had to leave early to come here, and Thornburg was talking. And it seems to be a topic that hasn't been brought up, and that is the transition from COVID times to coming back to workforce. And I know that a lot of employers are very active in the Corona Chamber of Commerce, and we have businesses that are having challenges getting people to come back non-remote. And there seems to be a question on, accountability and everything. Do you see that? I mean, and now I just heard on the news this morning that they're looking at Social Security workers having to come back in the office, but it seems to be more of a employee mentality of being able to say, no, I'm not going to, and then they're willing to quit. So when we're talking about the unemployment, do you think that plays a part into it? Is that the entitlement some of the workers are having now, that they're feeling that they're okay to just to lose their job if they're not going to follow, or they sue. There's a lot more lawsuits for employees. So, when we're talking about the unemployment, there's a lot of pieces that I think are kind of after, and I could be wrong. You guys have the information.
I'm going to go to Shannon first, and then Wallace as the two big kind of office centered economies with people with real impacts from people not coming back in. So go to you two.
So it's definitely an industry by industry basis that you're seeing it. And I come from an organization that still is continuing a hybrid work situation, and in fact use the opportunity to downsize our office. So we're using that as a way of lowering our expenditures, and so we can invest in other things like additional staff or so it's a reprioritization, especially I think in professional services, of figuring out what your priority is and where you want to actually put your money into. But of course you have other industries where there is, if you're in a field that has a lot of personal engagement, for instance, in research, we're kind of lucky because we're mostly in front of a computer screen all the time. But if you have a role that is requiring you to be engaged with stakeholders and partners, then that's likely going to be something that's going to require in person. So it's really individualized based on your industry and your roles within these particular industries on what that looks like moving forward.
I would just echo what Shannon said. That's exactly right. It's industry specific. In the tech industry, I don't think they're ever going back to 5 days a week in office. And especially they're able to access talent, globally, basically. Healthcare is a different situation. And depending on what industry is, most prevalent in your particular geographic location, I think that's it. I do think it's going to remain elevated, the office vacancy, but it's nothing like San Francisco. The San Francisco office vacancy rate is at least 50%, if not more higher than the downtown area.
Growing significant on adding more office space.
Yeah, I think those developments where there's mixed use, where there's housing and office and retail and restaurants. I think one big trend that I don't think is also going away is when people come home from work, they don't want to get back in the car. So if you can build housing in locations where people can go out to eat easily, can walk there, or can even walk from work to their housing unit, I think that's the wave of the future, is building those things. We used to segregate them in planners, the housing was here and the downtown was here. I think we're more intermingling those things over time, which I think is really good.
Thanks for that, Wallace. There's a lot of evidence that downtowns that did that are doing better. So it's a great point. Manfred, I know you had a quick point.
Yeah, and that's particularly important for the Inland Empire, right? Because we do believe that people have moved out to the Inland Empire because they didn't have to be at work physically anymore. Let me just add that I remember Thornburg saying, in 2020, I was there, and he said the coronavirus recession is going to be over in a year's time. That is, well, the GDP is correct. GDP recovered, but the effects from the coronavirus recession, whether it is the work week or with hindsight, the regrets that we had with shutting down primary schools, or to this day at the University of Redlands, still teaching courses in Zoom. That's to me unbelievable. But these are all things that are hangovers from the coronavirus that we still have to deal with. And the biggest one, I think, of them is the work week, and how we in the Inland Empire in particular will have to deal with that. That gets back to getting jobs into the area where you don't have to commute, right?
Thanks so much for that.
I get two more in.
Go
John?
ahead, President.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very thoughtful discussion today. Recently, I went through a thought exercise of looking at our California construction cost index and comparing that to our CPI for the last 25 years. And what I found was that the construction cost index has increased 260% in the last 25 years, while CPI has only increased 88%, which means that there's been a 3x increase in construction cost over inflation. So I'm wondering if any of you, which impacts not only new construction, but also replacement costs. And I was wondering if any of you have looked at that or can look at it for us and kind of pare down, do we need to do a cost benefit analysis on all of our construction codes to determine whether are we really 3 times safer now than we were with the houses or the buildings that we built in 1999? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Michael's going to start on this one.
Yeah. Everybody put sharp objects down for a second. Construction costs are up because labor costs are significantly higher. Transportation costs are significantly higher. And this is the sharp object one, CEQA costs. You have to calculate the time and the money that it takes to go from point A to point B to build something. And unless you're SoFi Stadium and you get an exemption, it takes years to do it, costs millions and millions of dollars, and that's impacting the costs of construction and homes.
Thanks for
But
that.
it's also,
Go ahead,
it's
really quick.
also material costs, right? And in particular, material costs from Canada that were affected by tariffs before, right? That have really skyrocketed.
We'll go to the last question. I
Yeah.
think one really quick high level point on this is that all the things we talked about around disaster response are also increasing those costs because there's just more construction happening because of a combination of these factors. Go ahead.
And that's a big factor. I'm just gonna put my old hat on back when I was in the legislature when California did away with basically the California lumber industry and chased it out of state. That also raised the prices. Instead of fixed it, we taxed it. So that's the reason why I went on it. Wendy.
Thank you. Just, I want to drill down a little bit more,
Left.
shortly, just a short question. It has to do with insurance. We're well aware there are hidden costs for the people that are buying affordable housing, which is usually condos, usually attached. Their association costs, it's almost impossible to get insurance. And I wonder if you are going to see, or if we can collectively get our insurance commissioner to address this, because there's more than one reason the insurance companies are leaving the state.
Yes.
I'm putting it out there because that's a huge driver for housing. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We have multiple cards up, but I'm also need to have the obligation to get everybody out by 2. And we have another report coming up. I want to thank all of you being here. If you don't mind hanging out for a little bit for those questions, because we are all burning those questions. Maybe a little bit after. We'll be done wrapping up here in 20 minutes or less.
And read the report.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask Lucy, which is our next, just to kind of close out with her part real quick before we get to our last presentation item.
Well, I think my business report is sort of represented in
Yeah.
this great panel we had. So I really don't have anything formal for you, Mr. Chairman. But my one quick question for the panel, if I may take this opportunity, is the Hoover Commission said that the growth of government jobs in the state increased by 96.5% from January 2023 to June of 2024, the Hoover Institute. And California is notoriously, from the business community's perspective, one of the worst performing states in job growth. But when our job growth is government jobs, your thoughts on that as it affects private sector job creation and the over-regulatory environment that California is notorious for. It's interesting because elections have consequences, and that's all we're seeing out of the feds, right? Is cut back on regulations, but California is doubling down in a different way. So economists, your thoughts on this? Sorry, put your sharp objects down.
I'm assuming President Hagman
Yeah.
won't let us answer this question.
No,
so
that would be like a whole 2-hour event here.
it's a good question, though.
But yes, that's a good point, Lucy. Thank you. Thank you, panel, very much. Thank you for all the insights. Don't forget, you can scan it. You can scan your QR code and get this full report, and we'll try to get some more out to you. So thank you.